You told me to handle the event, Damien. You never said anything about how I should look doing it. The sound that moved through the Ashford Grand Ballroom wasn't applause. It was the specific silence that falls when 200 people simultaneously forget what they were saying. Damien turned toward the entrance. Imani Rhodes stood at the top of the grand staircase. Not his assistant. Not the woman he'd called at midnight to say handle the gala logistics, where something appropriate, meaning invisible, meaning background, meaning the same quiet competence she'd been pouring into the thankless corners of his empire for 3 years. This Imani wore an oxblood gown the color of a darkened rose. Thousands of deep crimson crystals cascaded from the bodice, catching the chandelier light with every breath. Her rich brown skin glowed against the wine-dark fabric. Her hair swept upward, exposing the line of her neck, a posture he had never once properly looked at across 400 days of standing beside her. Jonathan Reeves, a man who'd negotiated 9-figure deals without flinching, was already crossing the room toward her. Damien's hand tightened around his glass. He had trusted her completely. He had seen her almost not at all. And the entire room was correcting that mistake for him, right now, in real time. Because what Imani does next is the kind of thing people talk about for years. Subscribe so you don't miss a single chapter. And if this already has your attention, let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Imani Rhodes had not eaten since 7 that morning. It was now 4 in the afternoon, and the Harrington acquisition was 40 minutes from collapsing. Not because the numbers were wrong. The numbers were perfect. She had checked them 3 times before Damien walked into the room and twice while he was talking. The problem was that Vincent Harrington's legal team had buried a liability clause on page 47 of the secondary annex, the kind of clause that looks like standard language until it isn't, and not one person in that conference room had caught it. Not one person except Imani. She slid a single no card across the table to Damien while he was mid-sentence. No interruption. No explanation. Just 4 words in her handwriting, page 47. Walk out. He glanced at it. Kept talking. But 30 seconds later, he stood, buttoned his jacket, and said they'd resume after a short recess. The Harrington team looked confused. Damien looked composed. Imani stepped into the corridor, called the firm's outside counsel, and had a revised annex drafted in 18 minutes. The deal closed at 6. Damien shook hands, accepted congratulations, and told the room the structure had been airtight from the beginning. He never mentioned the no card. He never mentioned it to anyone. And that was the part Imani had stopped expecting him to change, the part she had quietly, carefully made peace with, the way you make peace with something that still hurts every single time. What she hadn't made peace with was the other thing. The thing she had never told anyone, not even her closest friend. The thing she'd buried so deep under professionalism and discipline and 2 words that she almost believed she'd stopped feeling it. She was in love with him. Had been for 2 years. And she was almost certain, that he had no idea. But 3 weeks ago, she'd seen something in his office that made her wonder if she was wrong. She hadn't decided what to do about it yet. 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days. That was how long Imani Rhodes had been the first person in the building every morning and the last one to leave at night. She wasn't counting. She just knew. She was reviewing the Whitmore contracts when his office door opened. He didn't look up. The Ashford Gala is Saturday. Damien kept his eyes on his screen. I need someone managing late arrivals, table rotations, service timing. Someone I trust not to make it a problem. Imani waited. You'll handle it backstage. Coordinate with the venue team. Keep things invisible. She felt something move in her chest. Not pain, not yet. Something quieter. The feeling of a door closing in a room you didn't realize you wanted to enter. Where something appropriate, he added. He was already reading again. She stood there 4 more seconds. Long enough to remember the Shanghai acquisition, 8 months of her life, 3 countries, 1 deal that saved his company's 4th quarter. The Forbes profile came out the following week. Marcus Webb's name was in the 3rd paragraph. Hers wasn't in it at all. Long enough to remember the Harrington Summit, where she'd prepared the entire keynote framework and sat in the back row while Damien delivered it to a standing ovation. long enough to understand that invisible wasn't a logistics instruction. It was how he saw her. Understood, she said. 2 words. She'd gotten very good at 2 words. She walked back to her desk, sat down, and opened her contacts. Scrolled to a name she hadn't touched in almost a year. A designer. A friend. Someone who had once told her, "You dim yourself for rooms that don't deserve your light." Her thumb hovered. Damien's voice came through the intercom. "Imani, reschedule the Meridian call. Push it to Thursday." "Already done," she said. She pressed call. He would never know what that phone call set in motion. He would never know until Saturday night, when the entire room showed him what he had been too blind to see. Imani didn't cry when she got home that night. That was the thing nobody tells you about the moment you finally break. It doesn't always look like breaking. Sometimes it looks like a woman sitting on the edge of her bed in a dark apartment, still wearing her work clothes, completely still, deciding something. She was done. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just done. She opened her closet, ran her fingers across the row of carefully pressed blazers, the muted palettes, the professional armor she'd built piece by piece over 3 years of trying to be taken seriously in a world that kept mistaking her silence for smallness. She pulled out her phone and found a number she hadn't called in 11 months. Celeste Adair picked up on the second ring. They had met 4 years ago at a private runway event Imani had attended on behalf of Damien, handling his guest list, his invitations, his name on the donor wall. Celeste had been the designer. The one who watched Imani move through a room full of wealth and asked, simply, "Why aren't you the one being dressed?" Imani had laughed it off. She always laughed things off. She wasn't laughing now. "I need something," she said. "Something that says I was never invisible. I just stopped making it easy for people to see me." Celeste was quiet for a moment. Then, "I have something I've been holding. I designed it 6 months ago, and I kept thinking, I'm waiting for the right woman. I think I was waiting for you." The package arrived 2 days later. No courier van. A black car. A sealed garment case. And inside it, oxblood red. Deep and unapologetic, with thousands of crystals that caught light like they had something to prove. Imani held it against herself in the mirror. For the first time in 3 years, she looked like exactly who she was. Saturday was 4 days away. Damien had no idea what was coming. 1:19 p.m. Imani had known about the staff entrance since the first planning call. Side door, service corridor, name badge clipped to the left lapel. She walked past it without slowing down. The main doors opened. The chandeliers hit her like a verdict. For one breath, she stood at the top of the staircase and let the room find her. She didn't scan for Damien. She didn't need to. She already knew exactly where he would be standing, third table from the north wall, whiskey in his right hand, back to the entrance. She'd spent 3 years knowing where he was without being seen herself. Tonight, she was done with that. The first person who noticed was a woman near the champagne wall. She stopped mid-sentence. Her companion turned to see why. Then the man beside him turned. It moved through the room like a current, not loud, not sudden. Just a slow, irreversible shift in attention. Imani descended the staircase. The crystals on her gown caught the light with every step, scattering red across the marble like something burning. She moved the way she always moved, unhurried, precise, except now 200 people were watching her do it and understanding, perhaps for the first time, that her composure had never been submission. It had always been power. She'd just been spending it on someone else. Raymond Okafor reached her first. Head of Okafor Ventures. A man whose calls Damien returned within the hour. He introduced himself like she might not know who he was, which meant he already suspected she did, and within 4 minutes he was leaning in, laughing at something she said. Entirely unaware that she had read his entire fund prospectus 18 months ago to prepare Damien for a meeting Damien had then cancelled. She had never told Damien that. She had never told Damien a lot of things. 2 more men approached. Then a woman, Celeste Adair, the most connected art patron in the city, who took both of Imani's hands like they were old friends, which, it turned out, they nearly were. Damien saw that. Imani felt the exact moment his attention locked onto her from across the room. She had always been able to feel when he was watching, she'd just never had a reason to let it mean anything. She turned to answer something Raymond was asking and did not look back. Because here was the thing Damien Ashford didn't know yet. She hadn't worn the dress to hurt him. She hadn't even worn it for herself. She'd worn it because it was the last night she planned to be invisible, and she wanted him to remember exactly what he'd chosen not to see. Damien didn't move. He told himself it was composure. It wasn't. It was the particular paralysis of a man watching something irreplaceable slip through his fingers and knowing, with devastating clarity, that his own hands had done the letting go. Jonathan Reeves was laughing at something Imani said. Not a polite laugh. The real kind. The kind that meant she had surprised him, and he liked it, and he wanted more. Damien knew that laugh. He'd never once heard it directed at anything he'd said. He watched two senators cross the room toward her. He watched the chairwoman of the Ashford Foundation, a woman who had made him wait 19 minutes at his own donor event last spring, touch Imani's arm like they were old friends. Maybe they were. He didn't know. That was the problem, and it hit him now like something physical. He didn't know. 3 years. 1,100 working days. Coffee orders and crisis management and 1,011 p.m. emails that she had answered inside 4 minutes, and he didn't know a single thing about who she was when she stepped outside his orbit. He didn't know who sent that gown. He didn't know who the designer was, or why a courier in a black car had apparently delivered it like something precious. He didn't know that the investor currently handing Imani his card, Marcus Holt, the one Damien had been pursuing for 8 months without a single returned call, had just asked for her number instead. He found that out because Imani's smile shifted. Polite. Controlled. The same smile she gave Damien when she'd already decided something. His jaw tightened. He remembered last Thursday. The exact words. Where's something appropriate? He'd said it without looking up. He'd said it the way you say things to furniture, not cruelly, just carelessly. As if she were a fixed object in his world and not a person inside it. He'd said it. And she had stood in that doorway for 4 seconds and said understood, and he had not once wondered what the word was costing her. Now Jonathan Reeves was guiding her toward the terrace. Now she was letting him. And Damien Ashford, who had built an empire on never being caught off guard, on always knowing the next move before the room did, stood completely still and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Afraid. Not of losing a deal. Not of losing a board vote. Of losing her. Of having already lost her. Of the possibility that she had made a quiet, devastating decision in that doorway on Thursday, and tonight was simply the proof. Damien didn't ask. He never asked. His hand closed around Imani's wrist, not rough, but absolute, and he steered her through the side corridor off the ballroom before she could finish her sentence with Jonathan Reeves. She let him. That was the part that should have warned him. The VIP lounge was empty. Low lighting. The muffled bass of the Gala bleeding through the walls like a heartbeat. He released her wrist and turned, and for a moment he just looked at her, this woman he'd spent 3 years not seeing, standing in that oxblood gown like she'd always belonged in rooms like this. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Then came the version of Damien Ashford the boardroom knew. You're supposed to be coordinating the East Wing arrivals. Imani looked at him the way you look at someone when you've already grieved them. I know, she said quietly. Then why? Because I'm not doing that anymore. The room shifted. He felt it. She reached into her clutch. Slow, deliberate, and placed a folded envelope on the table between them. He didn't touch it. He didn't have to. He already knew what it was, the same way you know a door has closed before you hear it. Imani. It's effective the 31st. 3 years. Every early morning. Every crisis he'd handed her without explanation. Every time he'd taken credit for her thinking, dismissed her in front of people who should have known her name, called her at midnight and expected her to answer like gratitude was salary. You can't, he stopped. Because he couldn't finish that sentence without admitting everything it contained. She could. She absolutely could. And they both knew it. Damien. Her voice was almost gentle. You don't actually want me to stay. A beat. You just don't want to find out what happens when I'm gone. She picked up her clutch. And the most powerful man in the room had absolutely nothing left to say. Damien didn't argue. That was the first thing that broke her. For 3 years, he had an answer for everything. A counter for every point, a correction for every imperfection. And now he was standing in the middle of the VIP lounge with his bow tie slightly undone and his jaw tight, and he had nothing. She laid the resignation letter on the table between them like a closed door. I'm not asking for a title adjustment, Damien. I'm telling you what happens next. Executive partner. Equal decision-making authority. My name on the Meridian restructure, the one I designed. Or I walk out of this building tonight and I don't come back. He looked at the letter. Then at her. Imani. I've already been offered something better. Twice. She said it quietly. That was the part that hit him hardest, not the anger, the calm. I stayed because I believed in what we were building. I need to know if you ever understood that the we was real. Something moved across his face. Not a boardroom expression. Something older. Something that had been behind his eyes for longer than either of them had acknowledged. I knew, he said. I knew, and I wasted it. For words she had waited 3 years to hear. And they didn't feel like victory. They felt like arriving at a destination after the trip had already cost you everything. Then prove it, she said. Tonight. Not tomorrow. Not in a memo. Tonight. He picked up his phone. Called the board chair. Right there, in front of her, without hesitation, and she watched his voice stay steady while the rest of him was clearly falling apart. 40 minutes later, Damien Ashford stood in the center of the ballroom and introduced Imani Rhodes as his executive partner to every person in that room. The applause was immediate. Damien didn't smile at the crowd. He looked at her. And Imani realized, with a fear she hadn't expected, that this wasn't the ending. This was the most dangerous part. Weeks later, Imani Rhodes walked through the glass doors of Ashford Global Holdings at 8:14 in the morning and did not stop at the desk by the window. She had spent 3 years at that desk. 3 years of early arrivals and late departures, of solving problems Damien never knew existed, of pouring herself into a company that had never once put her name on anything. She walked past it without looking. The new desk was on the executive floor. Corner office. Her name on the door in the same brushed gold lettering as his. She hadn't asked for that detail. He'd arranged it himself, at some point between the gala and the board announcement, in the particular quiet way Damien Ashford did things he couldn't say out loud. She noticed. She didn't mention it. He was watching her from across the hall when she arrived. She could feel it the way she had always felt his attention, except this time it didn't carry the weight of being evaluated. It carried something she didn't have a word for yet. Something careful. Almost cautious. Damien Ashford, cautious. 3 months ago, she would have called that impossible. She set her bag down. Opened her laptop. Pulled up the Meridian file she'd been restructuring all week. He knocked on the open door at 8:31. She looked up. He didn't have a reason to be there. No briefing. No crisis. No acquisition that needed saving before noon. Just him, standing in the doorway of her office, holding 2 cups of coffee, one black, one with exactly the amount of cream she'd never once told him she preferred. He'd noticed. Apparently for a long time. You didn't have to do the nameplate, she said. He set her coffee down carefully. I know. A silence opened between them. The kind that wasn't empty. I have the Callaway call at 9, she said. I know that too. He didn't leave. And for the first time in 3 years, she didn't ask him to. If this story stayed with you, hit that like button. It genuinely helps more people find these stories, and it tells me you want more. Subscribe if you haven't already, because the next story is already coming, and I promise you, it will hit just as hard. I'll see you in the next story.